Welcome to the Further Reformation podcast. I am Benjamin Hicks, and I'm joined today by Jeremy Bundy and Mark George. How are you doing, brothers?
Doing well.
Doing awesome. Thank you.
Well, last time we discussed Mark's business at Thousand Generations Publishing. And we thought it would be nice to follow up, the three of us, with one of the ventures that Jeremy has going on, and that is Boniface Solutions. So you follow Jeremy on social media, or you are aware of Boniface Solution from some other connection, you might be aware of it somewhat, but we wanted to do a whole episode about how it is that he helps give advice to those who are seeking to maximize business opportunities and marketing, as I understand it. So maybe, Jeremy, you can say in a line or in a word, what is Boniface Solutions and how did you launch it and what is it that you do for your clients?
Yeah, so Boniface Business Solutions is basically like a marketing consultancy. We help businesses grow in consistent ways. So a lot of the things that plague business owners are feast or famine cycles. One month they're busy, they can't keep up with anything, but they're so ingrained in that work that the next month they're like, where are my leads gonna come from the next month, right? So we ultimately built a system. We call it the Magic Beans system, and we implement that in businesses to see consistent growth. So Boniface Business Solutions was ultimately birthed out of a number of frustrations that I had. So you brothers know my background is in video production. You guys know me as a video guy, but I actually got my start in the audio world first, and I was actually working with a lot of big companies here in Canada on high budget marketing projects, and started to see something that actually really bothered me. So we'd roll in with thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars in video gear and crews, you name it, and these companies would drop hundreds of thousands of dollars on their marketing video projects, and I would always kind of ask around, but nobody ever really understood the question, like, what is this supposed to do? What's the plan to see a return on this investment? And a lot of them were getting like massive government handouts for for these projects, and nobody could really tell me, like, how are we actually using this to see a return on that investment? There was no real strategy, no clarity on who they were speaking to. It was kind of just a bunch of creative artists in a room brainstorming things that could look cool. So it was completely detached on, you know, how people actually make buying decisions. There was no plan to turn the attention that it would garner into revenue. So it was kind of like watching a blindfolded guy throwing darts at a dartboard, just hoping that, he would hit the bullseye. So when I started out on my own, I started doing video on my own, and I was actually plagued by that question because I wanted to offer a better, more holistic service when it came to video than just, I can shoot your video for you. And, you know, we were getting clients that felt the need for video, but couldn't articulate why they needed video. So they'd come to us and say, I got this video idea. We got to shoot this video for our website. And I would be like, okay, why? And they would come kind of bumble and babble through, well, I mean, like everybody else is doing that, right? Right. Um, so I obviously wanted to offer a more solid service to these business owners, and saw that problem of business owners not thinking through wanting to see an actual return on their investment. So, you know, really getting them to ask the questions like, where does this video go? What's it going to do? Who's it going to reach? How are we going to get traffic to that video? Is it going on the website? What about social media? What about print advertising? How do all these tools and all these assets fit into like a symbiotic business system, right? So how do you move someone from stranger to buyer? And that's when things started to click for me, because as I really began to study this, I realized that every business that's grown consistently, regardless of industry, has done so by following a really simple process. It's by following traditional principles. It's not about gimmicks, not about hacks, not about what the latest internet guru is trying to sell you, this tool that's going to 10x your business or whatever. It's just timeless, proven principles. They understood their market. They crafted a message and communication that would make sense to the people they were trying to reach, and then they offered something valuable for free to begin that relationship with the people they were trying to reach. And then they used tools of their time to basically amplify that and become more efficient in their distribution. So, I mean, we can look at even the Reformation as an example of this, right? I don't, I'm not saying it's a perfect one-to-one, and I'm not trying to go headlong into heresy, but we can definitely look at, the principles of the Reformation, right? Because Martin Luther used the printing press. The printing press wasn't the foundation of what he was doing, right? He was digging through scripture, uncovering God's word. He wrote it down in a way that would punch, right? 99 points. I love that as a marketer, because it's like, here are 99 problems with the Roman Catholic Church, right?
Mhm.
And here's how Christ can set you free from this bondage, right? So his messaging hit home, and then he goes and he nails it to the door. But then he unknowingly, the printing press at that time was beginning to gain popularity, and then all of a sudden the printing press took that message and then amplified it and spread it in a much more efficient way than Martin Luther could do on his own, right? It wasn't the tool wasn't the principle or the foundation of it. It was the amplifier, right? So um that's kind of like what a lot of our messaging is. It's tools are secondary. They constantly change and are anything but consistent. But when you build a business on foundational principles that don't change, you can use tools as amplifiers, not as your foundation. So that's kind of a little business tip if any business owners watching. But that's when I really started to see how this tied back to creational norms as well. So I mean, Ben, you and I would maybe say natural law, but some people might be triggered by that, so we'll just call it creational norms for right now. Um, but God's design on how the human mind works, how people think, feel, and make decisions. So people don't need more time to make decisions. They need information. They need truth. And when you understand the structure of the human mind, the one that God created, you can build systems that work with that design and not against it. So I began to see that, like, man, marketers should actually be like Christians should actually be the best marketers on the face of the earth, because they're the ones that are able to articulate the like what goes on in the human mind because they understand how God made it. And the thing that really stunned me in my studies was that the only people teaching this stuff were pagans. Like, and that was a big gut punch for me and a massive frustration, because I couldn't understand why godless entrepreneurs were the ones explaining things like delayed gratification and patterns they saw in nature in the human mind. And why does a Christian business owner have to wade through multiple chapters on manifesting your your
Mhm.
success, and or we have to listen to childless dinks. And by the way, dinks just stands for dual income, no kids. So
Mhm.
I'm just it's not a gross term. That's what you call people with no kids. But these people have horrible relationships with their fathers and talk about how you need to forget a work-life balance and just grind. Like, why do Christian entrepreneurs have to go to those people to receive any practical business growth principles for their own businesses? So I that really lit a fire, and as I kept studying, at that time I was having like a major paradigm shift from Baptist thinking over to covenantal thinking as well, and really rediscovering the biblical meaning of household. Uh, it was kind of a wild ride for me, and C.R. Wiley's book actually helped a ton. So, Mark, I actually think you have the book at Thousand Generations, right? Is the household and the war for the cosmos? Do you carry that one?
Hey,
Yeah. So that was phenomenal for me at fleshing that out. And I began to see things like our word for economy, or in the Greek it's oikonomos, which means house law. And that idea really wrecked me in the best way, because I started to see entrepreneurialism as a way to build Christian households, Christian institutions, and entrepreneurialism as a way to grow economic power, righteousness, responsibility, and legacy. So, Christian businesses that are part of the home that bless other Christian homes by hiring more Christians, and then that spills out and blesses the community, because all businesses, ultimately, it's really simple. It's just seeing a problem within your community and then learning how to solve that problem in the best way possible, right? So that's kind of like the story of those frustrations and that passion that was lit in me to be a Christian entrepreneur. So I don't know if you guys want to pause there before we talk about what Boniface Business Solutions actually does and talk about anything I said, or if you just want me to go into like what we actually do, I can do that as well.
Well, let me highlight a couple of things. One is that that book, The Household and the War for the Cosmos, is incredibly inspiring.
Yep.
I remember when I was a student for the ministry, just training in the denomination where I am. And I was driving all the way out to BC to do my internship with John Koopman and the churches out there. And so we turned it into a big road trip, me and my family. So we're all in the van and we're driving through the United States. And then the very home stretch, we were going to spend the night somewhere. And I decided, you know what? I'm sick of driving. I'm just going to drive right through the night, and the kids can sleep, and I'm going to do it. But how can I stay awake? So I actually bought the audio of that book. Like, I spent money on it, and I just hit play and I listened to it because I liked the title. And I'll never forget just going through it, the whole book in one argument, and how it draws in philosophy and history and polemics to talk about how the household is incredibly powerful for shaping culture and for preserving faithfulness, and at this time in civilization that's so important. So just that in the first place, take that as a strong endorsement to find that book.
From Thousand Generations Print Co.
Of course. Yeah. Our sponsor today, So.
It's right back here on the shelf somewhere.
But back to this, Jeremy, the thing that encourages me is that you're definitely a synthesizer, right? So you're taking insights from business and from marketing and theology and faith, and saying that all of these truths, they're harmonious, right?
Yeah.
And to me, if I'm understanding you correctly, what Boniface Business Solutions bring to the table is not only effective communication, but the stewardship and the strategy that goes behind that. So how do you allocate resources towards attracting customers in a way that is going to help you as a business owner? It's not something I'm have that same level of knowledge with, but I'm encouraged that there's someone who is a Christian saying we need to speak to these things in a way that's honoring to the Lord and is going to be of help to business owners, right?
Yeah,
So
being a good steward, right? So
that's great. So Mark, did you want to jump in before we let Jeremy expand upon that?
I think I'm gonna dialogue in a little bit about, kind of after Jeremy, I think, talks a little bit about what he does, how he's helped me with my business and whatnot. So I think I'm good right now.
Great. So why don't you jump into it, Jeremy?
yeah, so I'm gonna try to explain what we do just in three basic steps, and I'm gonna try to communicate this in a way that even the layman can understand. So hopefully it doesn't feel like drinking from a water hose, although I have that effect on people. So
And for me, I am the layman, so I'm
okay,
the perfect
so
person to
you
work
can
with.
ask me as many questions as you want. So three simple steps that we do at Boniface. Step one is consult with the business. So we sit down with businesses and learn everything there is to know about their business, what they've tried, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what their systems look like, their branding, their offers, their team. Because we found that most agencies, and we have a lot of customers that come to us because most agencies get tunnel vision. They'll kind of just jump right into, we do Facebook ads and you need to do Facebook ads too. And when Facebook ads don't work and they've wasted all this money, they come to us and they're saying like, well, what are we doing wrong? And part of that is just because there was no alignment with the business. There was no questioning what has worked in the past or what's working or what's not working, and the ins and outs of how they do business. So step one is just to get aligned with the business that we're working with. Step two then is to go deep on the best clients. It's the ones who buy fast, the ones who spend the most, the ones that are passionate about the product or service. And we study what triggered them to buy, what objections they had, what kind of resistance they had, why they chose that business over the other ones, how their research, what did the target buyers research look like? How many people did they research before choosing to go with this one? How they talk, what kind of content they consume? Because once you understand the the best buyer that you have, we can then strategize on what it looks like, the best way to go after more of those people. Because a lot of businesses will find that it's really only a small percentage of current business that drives 80% of the revenue that they have. And if we can go after more of those people, it's going to be a greater return on that investment, right? So a practical example of work that we just did, we're working with a roofing company in rural Pennsylvania, and these guys came to us because they had tried a lot of digital marketing that wasn't working out. But when we actually dove into some of the research in the research phase, we found out that there was zero online traffic, that people weren't using the internet to find roofing companies. It was a really rural part of Pennsylvania. So there was no big digital presence, right? So if we had just jumped right into, well, you need to do Google ads or you need to do Facebook ads, we would have ended up doing the same mistake as the last agency that came in there, right? So it was just old school small town business. So we did a lot of research with these guys and figured out, exactly who their ideal buyer was, what their triggers were, and then we wrote a full page ad in the local newspaper. So you think the newspaper's dead. It wasn't. They had this local newspaper with 6,000 subscribers on it. And we wrote this full page ad that really looked nothing like the competitors to stand out, and ran it in the local paper. And the ad cost them about $450, and they brought in about $60,000 worth of leads in the first couple weeks of running that ad, right? And that was a few months ago, so it might be more now. Um, but that newspaper saw such a great response from that ad that they offered a free write-up about the company, and they even had people reaching out to them saying, I loved that ad so much that I read it 10 times. Like, who does that to an ad, right? And that's the power of knowing in depth who your target buyer is and speaking their language and communicating in a way that they can understand, and not just coming into a business saying, you need to do this or this, but just saying, well, we don't know what you should do yet. We have to figure that out, and we have to put a strategy in place. And so that's where that ROI, or that question of seeing a return on your investment, works, is that we can only do that when we understand who you are and who you're trying to reach. And then, step three is, how do you actually, like, what is the strategy? What tools are you using for the strategy? So yeah, we can run Facebook ads, we can do Google ads, we can build your website, we can do automations, we can implement CRM systems, YouTube pre-rolls, even radio and print. But and we've built an all-star team of 100% Christians to do all that. But the implementation comes after you've nailed steps 1 and 2. The implementation is based on real insight, not guesswork. It's not that blindfolded dart throw at a target. And the goal isn't just to guesswork or get all esoteric with who we're trying to reach, but actually know deeply who they are and then strategize on the best ways to go and get them and be good stewards of the finances that God has blessed these Christian organizations with. And it's a very heavy weight that I bear when I work with these businesses because I so desperately want to see them do well and want to see them have a return on investment. So it's definitely not a line of work for those who can't handle a lot of stress. But that's essentially what we do. So I don't know if you guys have any questions on that at all, but
Well, Jeremy, as you're talking, I can definitely tell that it's a labor of love for you. That it's not just about a transaction, but it's because you're passionate about it, right? And I think that makes a huge difference. Another thing you were mentioning about knowing exactly the ad and how to present that and exactly the audience and how to target. I think a lot of people are specialists. So if you take someone who's, say, making custom picture frames or something, right? They might be devoting to themselves to that craft, say, and the whole concept of marketing is strange to them, right? And so having someone who can walk through that seems to make a lot of sense. So that's great. So out of curiosity, what kind of training and experience did you, I think maybe you alluded a little bit, but
yeah.
In business and marketing and leading up to the starting of Boniface Solutions?
Yeah, so I have over 10 years of experience. I think one of the best things that I did was not go to any post-secondary education because we're seeing where all those institutions are at now. And man, I don't know where I would have ended up if God did not save me from kind of going that typical route that everybody goes. I was always a little bit of a risk taker, which I think is central to anyone as wanting to get into entrepreneurialism. I think I saw Mark's smile there. Mark's a risky guy as well. But yeah, as I mentioned, and as you guys know, my background was in video, so I was able to get a lot of experience on these big sets with people and ask a lot of questions. And I've mentioned on the last podcast, I think that I worked for a church, which allowed me to get behind the camera and get a lot of great experience that way. But as I grew in my convictions about the seeker sensitive movement, I ended and even just uh, the role of production in a church, my thoughts really shifted away from that more to traditional church. I stepped away from that too and took night shifts at a CNC shop cutting stone countertops just to be able to provide. But it was during that time and up through COVID that I really worked hard at just studying all that I could. And so there's tons of risk along this road. I went to the bank and basically asked for a business line of credit and had no savings in my account. I just was like, how much are you gonna give me? They said 10 grand. I said, sweet. And I launched Boniface Business Solutions 6 years ago now. So God's been great and very gracious with me and my business. I also have parents that have been absolutely they're boomers, but they're not boomer brained. So praise God for that. And they believed in my entrepreneurial journey. But I really see how God was just leading me along to get experience, a little bit here in audio production, then learning the ins and outs of that, and then learning how to tell good stories with video production, and then really taking those concepts and those principles and then through my own studies and just reading as much as I could and signing up for master classes and getting mentors in this space, really creating just a full orbed experience in multiple areas, more or less just learning the principles of business growth so that, like I said before, we don't get tunnel vision in anything, and then just building skills on top of that. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I have over a decade in marketing experience, but it's not training in a the classical institution setting.
The School of Hard Knocks, as they
That's
call
right.
it, right?
Yeah.
So,
My dad did think I was crazy, but now I think, seeing where the institutions have gone, I think he's very thankful that I didn't go to anything. And like, I mean, even the schooling system itself, unless you need a degree, information is so wildly accessible right now. I mean, it's everywhere. And so self-study for a lot of things is definitely the way to go. I mean, you still need key things like mentorship and accountability is huge as an entrepreneur. But as far as the knowledge, knowledge is it's everywhere now, right, with the internet. So I think I'm not saying never go to school, but I think you know, for most entrepreneurs, there's just a jump that they need to take, right? So,
Mhm. Very good. Well, one of the reasons we wanted to have Mark on this episode was because in our last episode, we interviewed about his business, and we thought, well, this would make perfect sense. We can now have him give a testimony about how you've been able to help him. So, do you want to get us started, Jeremy, by saying how you first connected with Mark and
yeah.
did that?
Yeah, Mark, I'm not sure how we crossed paths. I'm not sure how you found me. So,
Yeah, it was interesting. I won't mention the name, but a mutual acquaintance of ours, I had been in touch with him, and I was just literally had decided prayerfully to start the business, and was just first time entrepreneur in my 40s, not knowing what to do. And this guy's like, well, Jeremy at Boniface does our website and does stuff for us. And so I believe that was the initial contact, was through this mutual friend of ours. And
oh, okay.
yeah, so I reached one of the things before I launch into what Jeremy actually did for us was, so many companies are obtuse on the front end. You know, you have trouble getting in touch with them. Jeremy has a really easy method on his website of booking a call, and you actually end up getting to do a Zoom call with him like this, and he actually picks your brain and teases out, yeah, like all the stuff he said. What are you a new business? What kind of sales are you doing? What have you tried? And it was just very much a conversation like we're having now. And he was able to tease out a lot. And then all of a sudden he's telling me stuff. I'm like, yeah, yeah, that's exactly, he was pulling stuff out of me in the Zoom meeting that I didn't even really know was in there. So you can tell that not only does he really care, but he makes the system really easy. I think that turns a lot of people off right off the bat when you email somebody and you don't know, like, did they get it? Who did I? You get this email, kind of a generic email back, or like Jeremy said, with tunnel vision, kind of like, okay, yeah, we do SEO, or we do this, or we do, so right off the bat, it just felt like a really good fit. So yeah, Jeremy then put together a plan. He ended up building a bespoke website for us, doing market research. But even then, so he enumerated kind of, we're going to do this, this, and this. But then he's just like, hey, I had this really, like, he'd call me or something. I got this really great idea, and he'd have this bomb and slogan. I'd be like, yes, let's do it. And, some of the stuff we ended up putting, blazoning on our website, putting on banners, getting me canceled from various conferences. And so, it's yeah, no, so kind of all along the way. And then helped us with our logo, our branding, which was great. I know this is a very quick flyover, but I don't want to lose everybody in the minutia. But yeah, really every aspect of branding, marketing, even now, like, just as he encourages me to, yep, you got to get on those emails. Like, he built an email list for me, and had some really great ideas there. And how I can harness AI, and I haven't done it yet, but that's just trying to get my druthers about me. But he's
it's the
really,
accountability, brother.
yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. No, he'll call me up, like, just like, not me soliciting him, but hey, I've got this really great idea. I'd like to walk you through it. So if you're an entrepreneur and you have a business idea, or if you have an existing business, I would highly recommend reaching out to Jeremy, and just that's the kind of service you can expect. And so yeah, been super thankful for Jeremy and his crew there.
Thanks, Mark.
Jeremy, did you want to go any further into detail about your working with Mark's business?
No, it's been fun. That's I think Mark's probably the most qualified person to talk about it. So I don't want to.
So, between the call, the first initial contact, and the conclusion of your helping him, how long did it take to give him the extent of your wisdom and insight and planning?
I'm
Um, sorry.
sorry, you go ahead. You might remember a bit more.
Yeah, so I guess this was a while ago now. So I mean, you always look back on your old work and you're like, man, we could have done so much better. But I think that's just kind of, the natural progression as a business owner who's never going to be satisfied with where you're at. Um, I don't remember yeah, because it was a number of years ago. I don't remember how long it took to get the website live, but I think we've had a relationship where, if I get an idea, I'm just reaching out to him, and trying to be gracious with my time and trying to add value wherever I can. Because I mean, I understand, and even on that call, on that Zoom call, my goal with that Zoom call is not to sell you on anything. It was never to sell you. It was basically to make it as valuable as I possibly can by giving you as much free information as possible. So then, even if you don't want to work with me, um, or you don't have the financial means to work with me, my hope is that Christian entrepreneurs can flourish, and then maybe one day, down the road, we can work together once you have capital to reinvest into building out some of these systems, right? But
Mm.
I think I don't know if the question was how long until, from the initial consult to like implementing some of these things, but we've been constantly in contact over, the last year. We set up a system too to add books easily to his website. So he fills out a form, it comes to my team. I've set up an automation that automatically assigns a member of my team on the back end, and the book goes onto the website. And it's really, yeah, easy. So I guess if you count that communication, it's quite often, maybe like twice a month, we're in contact with
Okay,
each other.
so it's actually an ongoing service that you're helping with.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeremy, what some people might be familiar with the name Boniface, but where does that come from? And if you could explain that, and also why did you select that as the name of your business?
Yeah, so the name Boniface Business Solutions, it was named after Saint Boniface, which probably most of your listeners will find commonplace. But he was a missionary from the 8th century, I believe, and he was sent to convert the Germanic tribes who at the time practiced a lot of polytheism and revered sacred trees, particularly a massive oak dedicated to the god Thor, known as Donner's Oak. I think that's how you say it, Donner's Oak. But, anyways, Boniface traveled to that region in Germany, and in a bold move, he kind of demonstrated the supremacy of the Christian God by cutting it down. And the local pagans actually, um, they thought that Thor was going to strike him down, and then when Thor did nothing because Thor is a false god. A lot of them actually converted to Christianity. So Boniface then used the wood that he cut down from that oak to build the chapel, and so I would call that like an ultimate troll move, and maybe that's why I love it so much. But that story, it really resonates with me in our work at Boniface Business Solutions, because we're often using tools developed by, in secular contexts like Google ads or Facebook ads, but we're using those to build and grow Christian businesses. So it's, in my mind, it's kind of akin to cutting down that pagan oak and repurposing it to build a church. We're taking these tools, using them to advance the kingdom, build Christian institutions, and hopefully one day Christian business owners have enough influence that they can build better tools, and then we can see evil corporations like Google and Meta fade away as Christians are actually making money off of them to build better tools and more greater institutions. So that's kind of the thought process behind naming it Boniface Business Solutions.
Nice. So what I heard there is almost like you're viewing Boniface as um, somewhat of in the business world part of the Dominion mandate. Um, could you maybe flesh that out a little bit? How do you see that Boniface taking on that mission, fulfilling that mission as for us as Christians, taking dominion in the world?
Yeah, so for anyone that's not familiar with the Dominion Mandate, and we might have to get Pastor Ben in on this one. Although he's AMIL. He's as an AMIL, you still love the Dominion Mandate, Ben? I'm not sure.
All right. What made you think I'm all mill? I am a
Really?
post
Oh,
millennial.
oh, are you? Okay,
I
okay. I
am
just
post millennial.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Okay, so the Dominion Mandate, it basically comes from Genesis 1:28, where God's command to Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. And that wasn't just, about having kids. It was about taking the raw materials that God gave them in the garden and cultivating them or making it better, ordering the chaos, building, stewarding. That's basically what dominion means. And we see this echoed again in the post flood command that God gave Noah. It was the same mandate, right? Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. So it's not a one-time deal. It's a continual calling for Christians. And then you fast forward to Christ, and one of my favorite. This is kind of my favorite picture of this, the second Adam that comes to fulfill what the first Adam failed to do, right? And I don't believe it's I don't I think this was intentional when he's mistaken for a gardener after the resurrection, right? I mean, how are you mistaken for a gardener unless you're gardening, unless you come out of the grave and you start tilling soil? And so I think that's a picture that it wasn't just coincidence, but it was a symbol of the restored dominion of man properly stewarding the earth again. So I mean, you take that dominion mandate and you pair it with the biblical understanding of household that I referenced earlier, um, laid out in C.R. Wiley's book. And, we're not just talking a nuclear family with a golden retriever and 2.5 kids, right? Like Abraham's household was over 3,000 people. It was multi-generational. They were skilled, they were armed, they were productive. It was an economic unit. And so when you take dominion and combine it with the biblical picture of household, you begin to grow this picture of entrepreneurship, real entrepreneurship. Christ was a carpenter because his dad was a carpenter. It's not hustle culture or Silicon Valley nonsense, but the work of building, stewarding, and handing down institutions to the next generation, solving real problems, and not just blindly handing this down to future generations, but part of the Dominion mandate and stewardship is actually training your children to take over, right? Like doing that hard discipleship work of like raising your sons to take over the business when they're
Mhm.
old enough. So it's creating value that blesses your local community and future generations within your household.
Nice. And you're a family man yourself. You have some daughters and a son and another on the way. What does that look like in your mind, both for your own family, leaving your entrepreneurship, your business, for leaving a legacy for your kids, but then also, and I think you touched on it there, obviously the services you're offering, you're looking to see other businesses do the same and expand, take dominion, but also in their own family be able to hopefully see more and more of these multi-generational businesses handed down. What does that look like for you when you're thinking through that with Boniface?
Yeah, so I mean, if we're going to build businesses that can be handed down, it assumes that they need to be healthy and they need to be big enough to support families and weather life storms and um, be consistent enough to hand down. So I think personally, um, I've heard a lot of times Christians just saying, "Oh, I don't want the responsibility," or it's just too much work, or I don't want the added responsibility of growing a big business. And I kind of laugh at that because it's the big businesses that kind of skirted through the COVID lockdowns, right? It was that big healthy businesses that were able to offer shelter to churches that were locked down, places to worship. It was those businesses who were funding things like the trucker convoy and giving money away to those kinds of things. It was big businesses that funded Antichrist in his ruin, and allowed me to go on the road for 2 months with my family to interview the pastors that had been jailed. It was the big businesses that were really a blessing during that crisis. And so, for me personally, I want to grow the biggest, healthiest business that can bless as many people as possible, so that when I hand it down to my kids, I can hand them something that has weathered the storm, that can weather more storms. And then when we're working with other businesses, I obviously want the same thing for them. As we're doing it on Boniface Business Solutions side. I want to be able to help them do it as well for the same reasons. We have the best clients ever. I have a client that has 11 sons, and six of them work in the organization, and we're helping them build something that can support another 11 sons. You can't do that with your small kind of, it's only me working. I just want to build this business to sell it to an immigrant and then go retire on a beach in Florida. We really need a change and a 180-degree turn towards this idea of building legacy, discipling our sons to take over businesses that are healthy and can survive life storms.
And
Amen.
if you think about it, there's a ton of other benefits from working together with your family on a common enterprise, right?
Yeah.
Um, and this is the sort of thing that C.R. Wiley talks about in his book that we mentioned earlier. The fact that the reason why the Christian household has fallen under such hard times as far as the culture goes is because so many Christian people don't think about their family unit as something that they can actually do productive things together, right? And so
That's right.
therefore often a lot of organic relationships and discipleship opportunities and moral formation is lost because everyone's detached from one another, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm encouraged by all you're saying here, brother. So one of the questions that came to mind is you must work with all sorts of different business people, so it might be difficult to generalize because every case is going to be unique. But if you were to summarize some of the misconceptions about a moral and effective business practice, what would you say you're seeing in the business community?
How much time do we have? Do we still want this to be an hour and a half? Oh man, you guys asked me some questions on this episode where you're gonna get me ranting, and it's gonna drag on. So I'll do my best to be quick with this. But um, so I'll start. There's lots of misconceptions, and there's lots of stuff that goes on specifically in the Christian community about business. But I'll start off with a simple example that I think you guys will agree with me on. But Stephen Wolf, last week or the week before, tweeted something like Christians should hire more Christians, or only Christians should hire Christians. It's really that simple. And it sounds completely obvious. Um, it shouldn't be controversial, but it exploded online, right? So people lost their minds over him saying that. And that just shows like how far we've drifted from this idea of building a Christian economy where Christians support other Christians to build stronger households, right? Um, and then I've basically broken this down into tribe, not to pigeonhole anyone. I know that these are generalities, and that there's people that are going to break from those general things that I say. But the seeker sensitive crowd, this group's kind of allergic to clarity. They're afraid to speak boldly. They avoid being distinctly Christian. They'll kind of work with anyone, hire anyone, and dilute their message into oblivion to not ruffle any feathers, and the result is strife and confusion. Um, but the twist here is that they're often great at getting people on board. So gathering people around a cause, moving people to take action. So they've actually figured out how to make people feel something and how to lead with story and energy, which ironically is something that the Reformed camp struggles with hard. Um, but in Big Eva, fear drives everything, and I've seen this firsthand. We helped one business owner triple his income in a year, and instead of building legacy or stewarding that growth well, he panicked. He kind of saw the way the world was going and sold his business, tried to move away, couldn't sell his house, lost it all. So there was no long-term vision. It was just short-term, like self-preservation. And we see it how they treat wealth. Like you can take Hobby Lobby donating family wealth. It sounds noble and it sounds pious, but biblically, inheritance is meant for your children, and that's not generosity. It's just that's a failure of biblical stewardship, right? And then in the Reformed world, this is kind of land of the ivory tower. It's a lot of brilliant minds, but zero street sense. Communication is flat. Emotion is suspect. It's like they think if you feel something, you're probably a heretic. Right? So we've got pastors who can't translate deep theological truth into anything that actually hits the heart, and marketers who can't speak in the language of the people they're trying to reach. So, if you look at R.C. Sproul had this amazing ability to take really complex things and make it so easy for the layman to understand. And right now, it's almost like turned around to where we see very simple things made more complex and more convoluted and harder to understand, right? Or you have Paul, who said that he became like the Jews to reach the Jews, or like the Gentiles to reach the Gentiles. Now, we obviously know he wasn't sacrificing any of his principles. So I take that to mean that he spoke like the Jews to reach the Jews, and he spoke like the Gentiles to reach the Gentiles, right? So now we have a bunch of reformed brainiacs who wouldn't be able to last 30 seconds in a conversation with a local construction worker, or any or any conversation for that matter, because if it's not strict theology, they kind of get awkward and uncomfortable just speaking to the blue collar person, right? So this lack of understanding of how the rest of the world communicates is completely missed by a lot in the reform camp, and I believe that's why we've seen a shift in certain pastors gaining influence, because they can actually communicate truth in a normal, clear, stirring way that the hardworking blue collar father can understand. Um, so those are kind of the three different sections of it's just general stuff, and I know that there's going to be people that don't fit into those generalities that I said. I'm not saying that everyone in those kind of groups struggles with what I've said, but that's just a little bit of what I've seen in the business community as far as Christendom goes.
Mm. Did you want to jump in on this, Mark, before I go to the next question?
No, I've seen much of the same, and again, there are some guys that pleasantly break ranks or don't allow themselves to be put into those boxes. But yeah, those are some pretty good generalities. I've I forget who it was, but I heard one he was a former pastor, I think, but he's like, he likes to carry around even some cigarettes now and again. He does, and so he'll stop and like see a guy smoking and just like go over and start up a conversation, just like a blue collar conversation, not trying to, talk about propitiation or transubstantiation or anything like that, but just kind of like looking for ways, looking for on-ramps. I think, and this guy I should have said is super reformed, like kind of, swims in CREC circles. And yeah, I really appreciate those guys who kind of can try and take from both. But I think right now there's a lot of polarization in those camps that keeps them where they are.
Yeah, one of my favorite meetings was with a plumber, and my my right hand man Steve and I were able to meet with this plumber to do his website, and we were going through some of the stuff that we needed to do a really good website with him, and not a Christian at all. But when we started talking to him about beauty and order and taking chaos and subduing it and bringing order to chaos. Like it really just resonated with him, and being able to speak about it in those terms, like you wouldn't necessarily think as a plumber being an artist, right? But we're really seeing a return to beauty, and when you can use those terms and you can identify with the blue collar worker, and you can have those conversations. It was one of the most fruitful meetings that I've ever had as a business owner with an organization. I basically think this guy's going to be a Christian in 2 years, so we'll see. But just awesome conversations where I think, based off of other conversations that I've had with people in the reform camp, they kind of fear those conversations a little bit, because they're like, oh, what do I talk about? I can't talk about um you know like what you said, I can't talk about atonement, and I can't talk about the nature of Christ and the Trinity. So
Mhm.
they start to sweat in those conversations, because there just seems to be, the ivory tower that they know, and then the real world, and there's no way to clearly communicate these theological truths with the real world in a way that they'll understand.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think it's a fair point, Jeremy. So I think that you're putting your needle on the nerve there, right? And where we see those deficiencies, right, we've got to work through them. Sanctification includes working through our limitations in order to be the men that Christ has called us to be.
Amen.
And that includes taking dominion over every area of life and actually embodying Christianity and our faith in everyday life. So I think what you're saying is very important. Um, so my next question is about art, and you mentioned art a little bit. And those who've listened to our previous episode about the film Antichrist and His Ruin that you made know that you are very gifted in art. And I wonder if you could put on both hats for a moment, the Jeremy the artist and Jeremy the business consultant, um, and reflect upon what is the difference between art for its own sake and aspects of art that are used in marketing, because it seems like there's some overlap, but there's also some difference. I don't know if you've thought about that recently.
Yeah, that's a great question. And when I saw that you were asking me this question, at first I was like, I didn't know how to answer this, but spending some time thinking about it, I really see how much of a valuable question it is. So thank you for asking this. Um, I was initially puzzled by this, because I was focusing too much on the advertising element of marketing. So, like, ugly ads right now in advertising are doing so well. A simple post-it note on a desk with a message on it is bringing in tens of thousands of dollars in advertising, and they're raw, unpolished, and yet surprisingly effective. But as I kind of dove deeper into this question, I realized that it's not just about the visual art or visual aesthetics. It's about the art of communication. And so even ugly advertising, it's so effective because it's meeting people where they're at. When people are scrolling on social media or whatever, they're not used to seeing nice branded big corporation polished ads. They just swipe right by that stuff. But these ugly ads are getting people to stop, because it's more in line with what they're looking for, what they're usually seeing on social media. So it's kind of meeting them at uh, what they're intending to do when they're on that platform. So people see it and identify, it's something that their friend or family would have posted, right? So this is pointing to the art of communication. So I don't know if this is the answer that you were looking for, and I'm sorry if it's not, but we often encounter like websites with minimal content, and it's just a paragraph or two. It's kind of baffling, because this is where their potential clients learn everything they need to make that decision, and there's so little effort put into the writing. there's so little effort put into conveying a compelling message. And it kind of points to this broader issue that I addressed in the last question. We've kind of lost that art of beautiful communication. So I'm not advocating for like the ornate old English writing. I'm just talking about good storytelling that resonates with the reader, writing that moves people, that taps into the conversations they're already having in their minds. So storytelling is really at the heart of effective marketing, and so that's where the relationship between art and marketing, that's the similarity there. It's effective storytelling because it's not just about presenting facts, right? It's about weaving narratives that build trust and connection. And this is why actually at Boniface we emphasize that origin stories really have to be a part of your offer. And so we help clients articulate their journeys, how they started in ways that resonate with their audiences. And we do that so that because it's really important, that they gain the attention, and stories are super effective at identifying with people. So, you know, I think the art of storytelling, the art of communication, is kind of where these two pieces intersect, where marketing and art for its own sake come together because there's such a creative element that goes into effective marketing too. You know, you're trying to figure out ways that you can get the attention of people and be different. And if you look at just how many people are doing the same thing, saying the same things, telling the same stories over and over again, for you to grab the attention in a world that's so overly saturated by creators, it's a really hard thing to do, and it takes a really creative mind that can craft an engaging story well to grab the attention of people, right? And then under that umbrella of good storytelling, another thing that I've often thought about and I've kind of been reflecting on from our previous discussion about Antichrist and his ruin, um, and you know, you guys have mentioned to me a couple of times now how that film has impacted you. But imagine for a moment that you're listening to it without any music, right? Would it have would the impact have been significantly diminished? I think so because music is part of the storytelling process, right? And it enhances the message. It makes it more compelling, more memorable, and it kind of brings your emotions along with the point. So it's bringing your emotions along to where it should be with what we're saying, right? And it brings to mind a lot of, like another historical example that's relevant to our Christian heritage would be, in the 16th century. I'm not even going to pretend to say the name of the Dutch metrical psalter because maybe Ben could say it for us possibly, but I chose this one because I know your Dutch heritage. So if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the psalms and melodies were set to popular folk songs of that time, right? And in other eras, the psalms were set to like sea shanties and bar songs because it met people where they were. It took this deep theologically rich lyrics and it made it accessible to the people, right? And so the church was able to present these theological truths through familiar and engaging mediums. So I see this art of communication as the intersection of beautiful art and marketing. So I don't know if that answers that question, but that was a really hard question to understand.
But I think that's a very full and complete answer, and I appreciate it very much. It was a lot of things to reflect upon. The one thing I have to object to is that there is zero Dutch ancestry that I have.
Oh,
So
okay. I thought you were
the denomination I'm part of, it is 99% Dutch. So
okay. That's why I
I'm
assumed that you were Dutch.
so yeah, my ancestors are about as Anglo as they get. So what I usually tell people is that if you use the analogy of Romans 11, where you've got the good tree and the wild olive shoot, I'm one of the wild olive shoots, the Dutch tree. So
Before we
for me.
before we move on to the next question, Pastor Jacob, or Pastor Benjamin, I'm so sorry. No, it's been a long day. You yourself are quite the proponent of and lover of art. If your Facebook account is, if anyone follows you there, I highly recommend it. Some really great posts. But what just quickly, what does art look like in the messaging that you are putting across on Facebook? What if yeah, just I thought that might quickly be uh,
Yeah,
germane to what we're talking about.
thanks for asking that, brother. And for me, what I've noticed is that there are a lot of things on social media that are incredibly damaging to the soul that you just see in the scrolling, right? And I've noticed that a lot of Christians, because we're outraged at the culture around us, we're posting sometimes the images of our enemies, right? So
Mm.
there's, transvestites and perverts, and they're doing something terrible with children. And so we're shoving it in everyone's faces, and the net effect is very demoralizing. And the ugly and the profane and the perverse is just always exposed there, right?
Mm.
And so I've made a point of posting art frequently on social media. A number of years ago, I had a whole page devoted to it. So I've spent a lot of time going through Google Images and finding
Mm.
free, you know, uh, paintings from the past and doing enough research to know the genre and the artist and putting some information there. And so I did a lot of reading online about art, and I came to really be fascinated by classical realist paintings in particular. Um, Paintings that often are out of sync with trends in art today, right? So if you go to a lot of art galleries and you get to the modern section, you get really bizarre things that are out of sync with creation and aren't really highlighting the beauty of humanity or the nature of God's creation. And so I try to emphasize in art um, things that bring us to the good, the true, and the beautiful, and that especially ground us in the heritage of European art in particular. I think that is part of one of the motivation of the destruction of art in some circles today, and its replacement with abstract and arbitrary things. It's sort of an attack on Western European civilization as well. And I think that it's important for us to assert that legacy is ours.
Mhm.
And so, how does that connect with kind of what Jeremy is saying? Well, I think that there is a somewhat difference in um, art for its own sake in that sense, where you're simply trying to tap into the beauty and the truth and the transcendence of God as it's revealed in creation, and taking those principles and using it in order to bring a marketing message. I think that they are different, but they also overlap. And especially what I appreciate about what Jeremy said very much was that you should think about telling a story. And I think the best art, when you think about paintings and things, it brings you into a story and you reflect upon how is it that this has come about? What is this sharing about the story of this particular piece and how that fits within the God's larger story?
Yeah.
So those are some things off the top of my head. Did you have any thoughts on those things, Jeremy?
I know this is probably not for this subject, but something that's interesting just about when art becomes influential on a culture, even non-Christians notice that. And so I don't know if you can see my lighting right now. It's got this triangle, and
Mm,
that's called the Rembrandt.
mm,
The Dutch painter. He used to always paint 45-degree angle, soft light on the face, and he was a reformational painter as well. And so you can watch tons of YouTube videos on pagans talking about Rembrandt lighting, right, and how to do it. And now you've seen just art that tells a story, making it into the secular world, and they're assuming these creational norms without even knowing it. So I just had that thought kind of in the back of my mind when you were talking about painting and stuff like that. But I think you nailed it as far as, it's those two Venn diagrams. They overlap, but they still serve kind of two different end purposes.
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. So did you want to take us to the next question there, Mark?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, transitioning from talking about art and what Jeremy's building, some of the stuff you've been posting, Pastor Benjamin, you think about the good, the true, and the beautiful and what we're trying to build, but there are many factors today in our culture, and politically, we've just come out of kind of a tumultuous election season, both here north of the border and south of the border. Here in Canada, what are some of the both cultural and political factors these days that are really serving to punish entrepreneurs like yourself and myself and the people you're trying to build with?
Um, so we've been working with both clients from the US and Canada for a while now, and we've noticed some really staggering patterns. So almost every Canadian business that comes to us is in crisis mode. Um, their backs against the wall, they need leads yesterday, and they're in triage mode. And honestly, if I could give kind of one piece of advice to business owners, it would be keep your foot on that acceleration pedal. Do not wait till the bad times to reach out to us, because I love to help business owners, but I can't help business owners when they have no cash, because my job is to feed my family as well. And so no matter how much I want to help, there's obviously a struggle there. And so in Canada, that seems to be the case where every business owner that comes to us is in that kind of back against the wall. It's do or die, and it's almost too late. But if we kind of take that and we juxtapose that against the businesses that come to us from the States, we're seeing that it's a massive contrast. The businesses reaching out to us from the States are absolutely crushing it. They're growing, they've got some money to invest, and they're looking for a long-term strategy to keep that momentum going. So, I mean, we've got 23-year-olds in the US pulling in multi-millions a year, and it's not just in Texas and Florida, even places like California, where it's not exactly business friendly, right? And California, with a population which is greater than all of Canada, by the way, I heard that stat and I was blown away by that. So California has more people in it than Canada, yet Ontario has more debt than California, which is crazy. And it really brings me to the core issue and what I think I've identified as how Canada punishes entrepreneurs. So the Canadian government believes it's it itself is the economy, right? It's not the people, it's not the businesses. The government has positioned itself as the beginning and end of economic life in this country, right? So in the States, by contrast, down there, you still have this belief that entrepreneurs drive the economy. And that's why, when you want to get a visa to move into the States, some of the requirements are investing into either buying a business or starting a business, growing it to be big enough so that you can employ Americans. And that fundamentally shows that the position of the American government is to believe that business is the main source of the economy in the nation. But Canada is different. Here in here in Canada, the government sees entrepreneurs as competition, right? Because we're not the backbone of the economy anymore. We're an inconvenience. And, I always joke, nothing starves entrepreneurial spirit like a stack of regulations a mile high. You know, another layer of red tape or another tax, another compliance requirement. So here's what that kind of looks like on the ground. The more I make as a business owner, and Mark, you feel this too, but the more you make, the more they take. So I'm being penalized for success. Like there's no incentive to grow. There's no reward. for blessing my community or hiring more people. And the only way for a lot of people to get through this is with government handouts, right? Government programs. And you guys know the saying, you know, if you accept the king's coin, you are the king's man. And this, of course, assumes that the king actually has coin. Because literally, just the other day, someone messaged me about their friend who's a government prosecutor. And they told me that the government's not even prosecuting certain crimes anymore. Do you guys know why?
Mm,
It's because they have no money.
mm,
So this is absolute clown world. There was a guy in the GTA who gets arrested for stealing a car on Sunday, breaking into a house and stealing a car on Monday, stealing another car on Tuesday. So he goes on a 3-day crime spree and every time gets arrested and released, right? So meanwhile, we've got government funding, sex changes, abortion access, government grants for business, you know, billions flying overseas to Israel and other countries for political posturing. All the while they say they can't fund courts or protect neighborhoods, so billions gone and squandered. So it's this isn't a bug in the system, it's intentional, and that's kind of my point with this is the government wants to be the only functioning business. They want full control, and that's why they've inflated the public sector so much, right? And don't worry, I'm almost done ranting, guys. So the I looked up the top 3 employers where I live in Niagara. So my family's been here since 1910. I love Niagara. But I don't know if I can stay here with my family anymore. And those are really serious conversations that we're really wrestling through right now. The top 3 employers in Niagara are Niagara Health, which is government health, the District School Board of Niagara, which is government funded schools, and Brock University, which is a government funded university. So Niagara Health has 6,770 employees. District School Board has 6,160 employees, and Brock University has 5,750 employees. So they're all taxpayer funded, all government controlled. And even when you look at the private sector, the next 2 on that list have received literally billions from the government. So Algoma Central Corporation, which is a shipping business, received over 1 million to study green energy. And General Motors received 50.3 billion dollars in government bailouts and 7.6 billion in subsidies. So private businesses that don't take government handouts are a threat to a government that views itself as the economy. So in Canada, starting a business isn't just hard, it's literally warfare. And most people don't even know they're in the battle, but they feel it and they feel crushed, they feel exhausted. I feel that daily, and that's what we're up against every single day as Christian entrepreneurs trying to build something faithful in this country.
Well, you say I tell you, you're ranting, and I'm here for it. I could go another hour and a half. It's but you can sense your passion. Why is it that you're so passionate about what you do with Boniface?
Um, I mean, it really it goes back to legacy because I think the modern church has really waged war on this idea of legacy. Um, we've kind of taken, you know, this whole idea of let me die and be forgotten to like extremes that it was never supposed to go. And you know, I'm still in a small town. I drive past streets all the time. My neighbor's last name is Teal, and I drive past Teal Street all the time. And it's because this idea of legacy, they've impacted the local community so much and blessed the community so much that they named streets after them. I'm not sure I'd want a street called like Bundy Avenue. It'd probably be like a bumpy dirt road, but um, but it's going back to that idea of legacy. And I think the quickest way that you stifle passion is to tell men that they should not pursue any family legacy, that you should crush that. Tell them that they're just trying to build a business for themselves. You know, tell them that they don't have to get married, they don't have to have kids to be fulfilled, that their family name can die as long as they're successful, as long as they fill the bank with millions of dollars. I think fundamentally, like it's this idea of legacy that just keeps me going. I've been absolutely driven to my knees. I've gone through some of the worst seasons I have ever gone through as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. I've literally just multiple times, while walking the dog in like a back cornfield, just gotten literally gotten down to my knees and asked God, like, God, like, please make it painfully obvious that I should stay on this course. And thankfully, it's always come back, and He's always faithfully answered that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But like you just don't get times like that. You don't get this utter dependency on the Lord like you do working a 9 to 5. I'm not saying that there's no stress in a 9 to 5. I'm just saying the stress and the dependency that you have on the Lord being an entrepreneur in Canada is incredible. It's some of the most stressful seasons, but it's also some of the most blessed seasons to just throw yourself on the Lord and trust Him. So I would say, like, going back to that concept of legacy and household and building a legacy through my household and building an economic and productive household is what gets me up every morning, and that's what's keeping me going. Obviously, the Lord being faithful in that, but that's the concept that really I get up and I have every morning I have a pit in my stomach about all the stuff that has to get done. And I think his name's Nathan Spearing, but he's got this great quote that's like, unless you wake up every morning and you have a pit in your stomach of all the stuff that's got to be done and you don't feel overwhelmed, like, you're basically not a man. Right? Like, so I keep going, okay, so this is normal. Like, I had that quote on my phone for a bit, just to remind myself that is normal. It's both a fun ride and it's a risky ride, but it's a very rewarding ride.
That's awesome. Uh, Pastor Benjamin, I was going to ask Jeremy where people could find him and get in touch with him, but just wanted to see if you had any more questions or thoughts about what Jeremy was just saying.
I've really learned a lot from this episode, and I think that this will be incredibly helpful to folks, Jeremy, as they seek to discern the Lord's will for their lives, and also as they seek to be good stewards of all that has been entrusted to them. As you say, that it is a different kind of calling to build something than to just plug into an existing institution or an existing business. But it's a necessary calling, and one that can be incredibly enriching as you've laid it out. So that's it for myself today. I'll let you close it out, Mark, if you like.
Jeremy, where would you like people to reach out to you if what you're saying resonated with them? Do you want to shoot them to a website, socials, anything like that?
Yeah, you can visit our website, bonifacebusiness.com. I'm really excited about a course that we have coming out. I'm hoping that it's live in the fall, but it's called Dial It In. It's something I always say to my kids when they're not focused. I say, kids, dial it in. We're doing catechism in the morning and they're fooling around. I'm like, kids, dial it in. So that's where the name came from. But my hope is that this is an immense blessing to people that wouldn't have the capital to work directly with us, but that Christian business owners can benefit from this course that basically lays out all that we do. So if that's interesting to anybody listening and you're a Christian business owner, reach out to me because I want to give it away for free for a certain amount of people. So you can just go to bonifacebusiness.com and contact us or book a call in at our scheduling link on our contact page.
That's awesome. I saw you advertise or talk about that in a video a few weeks ago, and I'm super excited for that. And
Yeah, Mark's in on it.
yeah, that's
Mark's getting it free.
That's right. Well, I've been super blessed, Jeremy, by your friendship and by everything you've dropped tonight. Just super, super excited what you're doing and just how you're building not only Boniface, but building God's kingdom and building a legacy for your family, but also for the church. So thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for your friendship, and thank you, Pastor Benjamin, for having me on again. I've really enjoyed my time with you, gents.
Yeah, thanks, brothers. It's been a blessing.
Thank you, brothers. We'll do it again soon. Until next time, listener, God bless.